Hey, good morning. So welcome. Hey, Emily. Hello, Lois. Glad you guys are here. Welcome. Here's the interesting thing. I used to do these live streams on here a lot during COVID. That's when I actually started doing this and got away from it mainly because it was just kind of time consuming. There was a lot to plan for, a lot to prepare for. And I realized then that I was probably overthinking it a lot. Good morning, Tracy. Good to see you, and Emily and Lois. Glad you guys are here. Thank you guys for taking some time out of your day to join me. So greatly appreciate that. I typically would just plan like actual content and deliver that to you guys. But what I decided to kind of do, and I've actually done a few live streams now. Last week, I started doing this. I think I did 3 or 4 last week, actually. And I made it really laid back, really low key, and by design. And what I'm actually doing here is, and the whole purpose of this is basically to kind of take you along with me as I do something that I do every single morning. And that is kind of perusing real estate news, like what is going on in the headlines in regards to our real estate industry. Like what's happening? What are things saying? What are people saying? What are things are happening? And what kind of changes can we see? And I do this every single morning. So I thought, you know what? Why not go ahead, and I've got the system already set up. I've got everything that I need. Why not go ahead and just go live and take you guys along with me as I go through some of the articles? And so it's going to be unscripted, really just going through some news articles, talking through those. Love engagement. So again, this is not like, hey, let me just deliver some content and talk the whole time. Be active in the chat, talk to me, ask questions. That's always welcomed. So please consider doing that. But so the whole goal then is just to kind of take you along with me. Very unscripted. So welcome to the Real Estate Advantage live show. I will be working on kind of drafting up a more set schedule for this, probably 3 to 4 times a week, mornings, probably more than likely starting around the 8:30 a.m. Eastern time mark. That's typically when I would sit down, kind of get my routine started for the day. I've already answered some emails, texts, made some calls a little bit, but about 8:30, I usually start kind of going through some news articles and kind of dissecting what's going on. And what I've noticed that if I do this every single day, I end up being able to see kind of a narrative in all the headlines that cuts through a lot of the fear mongering that you kind of see in typical news cycles. And you kind of get a bigger picture about what's going on. So that's kind of how this works. So you might hear me talk about an article today, and I might talk about the exact same topic 2 or 3 days later, and it could seem redundant, but at the same time, that's really how you ascertain truth inside of all these articles. It can be very, very confusing. So hopefully you guys are settled in. You've got some coffee. I drink way too much coffee. I gotta be honest. Way too much coffee. But grab your coffee, come along with me, and let's go through some news articles that I've just kind of popped up on my screen and just thought would be kind of cool to do. Leah, good morning. Good morning to you. Great to see you. Welcome from Lexington, Kentucky office. Awesome. Glad to have you. Thank you for taking the time to watch. Do appreciate that, guys. Okay, so let's start off. This is very much in the news right now. And I actually, if you want to go back and watch another live stream, you can. I've even changed the title to reflect what this is about. This is in regards to the talk that you're hearing all about, the 50-year mortgage, and what that means. And, Trump's talking about that. Had some conversations with some mortgage brokers too about what this means. Before we jump into this article, though, let's just simply say this. It is not a thing right now. You cannot do a 50-year mortgage. So even though there's a lot of talk about this being a possibility, it is not a product that can be offered. It is not being offered at all because it's not even a legal, regulated product. Dodd-Frank law and everything like that stops everything at 30 years. So this is something that would have to go through some legislation to be able to be a possibility. But it is kind of all over the news right now. So we do need to have a conversation about this. And what is the effects of actually having a 50-year mortgage? What does that actually mean? So I'm going to start off with an article here. So let me share my screen. So what we have here, this is from NASDAQ.com. So, the stock trading, site. And also, I think this is by, let's see. Yeah, NASDAQ, personal finance, go banking rates. So in this article, the headline simply says this: I'm a real estate expert. Here's why I think Trump's 50-year mortgage idea won't work. Now, this does not matter what side of political aisle you land on. I mean, sometimes people polarize one side over the other. The reality is I could care less about that. What I really want to see is the data and what does it mean if 50-year mortgages will become a factor. Like, how does that actually affect the real estate industry? Because really that's ultimately what's going to matter the most, not any kind of leveraging for the political landscape. I really don't care. So this article is written by Vance Carriaga for Go Banking Rates. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of read and briefly, kind of go over this, and you guys feel free to chime in the chat. It says President Donald Trump recently floated the idea of a 50-year mortgage as a way to lower monthly mortgage payments and make homeownership more affordable. Although the 50-year mortgage is not a new idea, it has taken on greater meaning in the current housing market. Home prices remain near all-time highs, and even though mortgage rates have come down, they're also much higher than only a few years ago, according to macro trends. Now, one thing I will say this, and I'm going to pause in the article. When you're reading articles like this, I appreciate when they cite sources and they give backlinks. So like this macro trends right here. So instead of just quoting something, they add the backlink. So if I want to verify or confirm or research the source of who's making this statement, I can do so because that's embedded in this article. So like if I was to click this, I can see exactly what this is talking about. And it goes directly to the data, right? And this is the historical chart of interest rates. And this is kind of this is a bunny trail, sorry, but it's kind of cool. This is a link that I think is actually really cool for real estate agents now that I stumbled upon this. So this is the historical chart right here for interest rates. If you were in real estate or buying and selling real estate in the 80s, you see exactly what was happening here, right? Like, look at this. Look at the 18.45, 1981. So high interest rates there. Then you look at the trajectory here of just a decrease in interest rates and then an uptick, right? So the interesting thing about this, no pun intended, is that I know we can look at the interest rate and say, 6.5% seems like a lot, but the reality is when you look at the historical norm, it's still really low. This is not that high. It's high compared to probably where it's been in a while, right? But it's still not astronomical where it doesn't make any sense. And again, I talk about this all the time, like how inflation works, what the interest rate actually means, and how that all adjusts, and that kind of stuff. But anyway, this is a cool little source. So they cite their source. They make that comment. They say they're also much higher than only a few years ago, according to macro trends. So they're referencing the source. So anyway, I love that because you can verify some of the data. All right. A 50-year mortgage with lower monthly payments because loans are spread over a much longer period of time versus a standard 30-year mortgage. But is it a good idea? Not everyone thinks so. There's people on both sides of the spectrum here. This guy's going to argue for, because the headline simply says that, and it talks about why it won't work. So we'll get into his argument. And there's a lot of here that I would say, I've not really read the whole article, but previous live stream, I talked about it. And I will say there's a lot of risk to the 50-year mortgage because you're kind of betting on what the market's going to be over time, because you're not gaining equity in your house as fast as if a 30 or 20 or 15 or 10-year mortgage, right? Obviously, you're paying more interest. So the actual home value, the amount you're paying for that house is greater. So there's a little bit of a balance there that needs to take place. All right, so most homeowners will never pay it off. One of the biggest problems cited by experts is that the vast majority of homeowners will never pay off a 50-year mortgage simply because they won't live long enough. So that's true, right? I mean, 50 years trying to pay off a mortgage, it's going to take you a while. The flip side argument is how long do people average live in a house? So my dog must be probably a delivery guy delivering some packages for Christmas. So the reality though is how long does somebody actually live in the house, and if that actually correlates to the monthly savings, and I live in it for 5 years, does it matter that I have a 50-year loan or does it not, right? So that's kind of the argument, is like, how long am I going to live there? But the reality is you're not paying much equity down in your house. You're paying much more in interest over time. So is it a good idea to even offer this package? Given those numbers, most homeowners won't reach the age when they can pay off a 50-year mortgage. Even if they do, they could find themselves in dire financial straits. According to Michael Micheletti, Chief Communications Officer, and again, quoting source, Unlock Technologies, a provider of home equity agreements. And here's his scenario, his statement that he gives. A couple in their mid-30s who enter into a 50-year mortgage agreement would be paying this off into their 80s. Micheletti said, that is problematic, given that the vast majority of homeowners will be well past income earning years at that point. It's likely people will not have saved enough to continue making their payments in those years, let alone have enough money to cover essential living expenses and healthcare costs. So true. Here's the thing. Most people are not good at saving money. Most people live paycheck to paycheck. So there are a majority of people that would fall into this type of loan that would quickly not have equity and be underwater, especially if they're beyond the age of work. Because then if they're going into Social Security and those type of initiatives, they're not making as much money as they once were, and they still have a mortgage that they're still paying off, and they don't have that equity, that they have not built any kind of wealth. It will take long time to build equity. Just mention this, a major benefit of shorter term mortgages is that you build up equity faster. That's because more of your monthly payment goes towards principal. Yeah, logic. It could drive up home prices. Now, let's see what this says. The idea behind a 50-year mortgage is to make home ownership affordable to more people. However, it could have the opposite effect, according to Todd Drowlett, real estate developer, investor, and star of A&E Networks, the Real Estate Commission. says widespread adoption would arguably make the affordability problem worse. Drollett said, the housing market is based on supply and demand, and prices are set at the most buyers are willing to pay for a home. If 50-year mortgages drop buyers' potential monthly payments, then you will have more buyers competing for the same house that can afford it, which will drive up prices even higher. That's a fair argument, because now you're going to have that income to debt to income ratio that lenders look at. If you can spread a mortgage out for 50 years, that monthly payment drops, so the affordability becomes a little bit better for them. That debt to income ratio for the buying power of the buyer. So in essence, you do open up the market to have more buyers in it. And when that happens, when there's more buyers, supply goes down. That means there's not as many homes. What ends up happening? Well, the homes begin to increase in value. So then it becomes more and more not as cost effective to buy. The affordability gets more and more difficult. It could lead to another housing crisis. I'm just going to jump down. We've lived that nightmare before, and the 50-year mortgage is a step toward going down that path. Lichtenstein explained, if the housing market drops, you'll see more people not be able to escape their homes because they don't have any equity saved. If an emergency payment comes, or when they truly need the equity to retire or pay for needed capital expenditures, like a new roof, the money will not be there. It's a short-term gain with terrible long-term consequences. Very true. I mean, when you start thinking about this, one of the best assets, your personal house is kind of difficult. It's a liability and asset all at the same time, right? The liability part is it's the biggest debt that you have. But at the same time, it has the most upside for building equity, so it can become an asset. So by streamlining this out, you're not building as much equity. So when there's an emergency that does arise, like they're saying, you don't have the equity to refinance into or fix big problems that might come up in your house. So that's a problem. The other risk, though, is, and this is probably more likely what will happen, because in some ways you might have enough equity over time to pay for new roofs and stuff. But what if the market truly does take a massive downturn, right? What if prices do begin to plummet? We now have people making monthly payments with very little equity, and the home value then drops. Now they've got this big debt on them that they can't sell for what the market is bringing. So that is a real risk, right? So there's obviously a lot to break down inside of a 50-year mortgage to think through. Does it mean it's the worst product out there? I mean, this sounds very negative, but the reality is we've got to have these kind of conversations. So let me just kind of hone in on just a few thoughts as we went through this article. So typically what I would do after reading an article, I would pause for just a second and think through just some concepts that maybe I can kind of teach other agents about, or think through myself if I have conversations with friends, family, or those that I care about. How would I have this conversation with them? Because this is being talked about in the news. It's probably going to be talked about even more as it's being pushed through or talked about over the next few months. Maybe not, but it could, right? So what is the premise? Like, how do we as real estate agents take information like this and what is being heard in the media and use it to educate our buyers? So the reality and the simple way I would say this is being able to talk through and educate your buyers on what the major consequences are for a 50-year mortgage. So if they bring it up, it's not just simply just dismiss it and say, oh, it's not even a thing right now, don't even worry about it. It should be a conversation, because when you have that kind of conversation, you're able to talk about, like, what is it that lower monthly payments would do for you? But then what is the cost when you pay double the interest paid over 50 years? Like, what does that look like? Because that same conversation is still very relevant for the same person you're talking to about a 30, a 20, a 15, or a 10. So if they bring up the conversation talking about a 50-year mortgage, why not go ahead and start talking about just mortgages in general? Being educated on these type of things, even if they're not as relevant yet, sets you up as the professional. So when it does become a possibility, you have the understanding about what this means, and you can better articulate what is actually going to happen to them and advise them correctly, right? So, and then let's just say that you have a conversation with somebody that is struggling to make a payment, or they're in a situation where they're thinking about refinancing, trying to get lower interest rates and what those kind of things look like. Or you're talking to a buyer that's right on the verge of not being able to afford a house, and they're bringing this up because it's 50-year mortgages might make it more possible for me to pay because it's $200 less. I can buy a nicer house for my family. I wish it would be a thing. Those type of things. The reality is, again, that kind of conversation could lead you into, if you understand kind of what alternative type programs are out there to help people get down payment assistance, how to use FHA or different types of loans out there, rural housing, understanding those type of programs out there that are already in place to help clients that may be struggling to try to get into a home. Educating yourself on those type of conversations when people start talking about this type of stuff. And then, I would just say in general, if this kind of comes up, I think what I would probably lean into more is counseling clients that you're working with, that this conversation is coming up, going through what a 50-year mortgage would likely do to pricing of homes. If we go down a 50-year mortgage route, more than likely it's going to cause that supply and demand to go off. So I think it would increase the value of homes overall. I do think when he was pointing that out, I could absolutely see that argument. Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen, because everything's so relative to the real estate industry is dictated by so many different things. So obviously it might not happen, but still, I think that's still something to consider. Let's see. Let's go to another one here. Let's see. Yeah. Buyers market shift. Yeah. So more housing markets are shifting toward buyers. It's not enough to make them want to buy. More housing markets are shifting toward buyers. It's not enough to make them want to buy. As the year draws to a close, this is by Yahoo Finance, Claire Boston, senior reporter. Article came out December 8th, 2025. As the year draws to a close, home buyers are gaining ground. Mortgage rates are hovering near year-to-date lows, and in a growing number of metro areas, market conditions now outright favor buyers. The only problem, many of these newfound buyers markets lack buyers. As of October, sellers outnumbered buyers nationwide by 37%, according to Redfin, creating the strongest buyers market since at least 2013. Buyers are in control when they have more inventory to choose from, which in turn helps limit home price appreciation. But despite these conditions, buyers feeling stymied by high costs and economic worries are exiting the market faster than sellers. So this article is going to be talking for more of probably a broader perspective of things. Real estate is always local. So take articles like this and go back to your local data and just kind of see where it lines up. The shift underscores how small affordability gains aren't enough to unfreeze a housing market where prices are more than 50% higher than pre-pandemic levels and mortgage rates are above 6%. At these levels, many aspiring buyers, especially first-timers, remain effectively shut out. As a result, home sales this year are on track to spend their third straight year near 30-year lows. So these are one of those articles that create a little bit of tension and angst in people. Going back to what I just said, it's local, but at the same time, this is not really a shocker when you look at the history of real estate cycles. This is not an indicator of a crash or anything really that drastic. What this is really an indicator of is more of like a shifting and a reset to what we have known over the past few years taking place. And this comes through that adjustment. So when Fed begins to increase your interest rate a little bit, it's for certain things to take place and for the market to kind of adjust. So it takes a while for the interest rate to go up high within the cost of home is increasing. Inflation is going over month over month. And it's way more complicated to then get the income to then catch back up. So you end up having this, inflated home value with a higher interest rate for a while. Income's down here. So it takes time for that new interest rate to bring the inflation down, so it stops inflating so fast, and it takes even longer for the income to then match back up. So that's kind of what they're trying to do here. So all these statements is really what you see when a market's trying to reset back to some kind of balance, equilibrium here. And that's kind of what this is. It's like it takes time, and yeah, there's tension in the market and there's some stress there. But at the same time, what's the alternative? Don't change interest rates. Let inflation keep going where it's going, and then you really do lead towards a crash. You have to make some kind of decision here. So, again, I don't think the article is bad. I think it's just not laying out. Hopefully, and it might do that. It might do that later. Where buyers are making inroads. Even though buyers stay hesitant, they're gaining leverage in more parts of the country. Buyers have long enjoyed the biggest upper hand in southern cities like Houston, San Antonio, Nashville, and Jacksonville, Florida, which have prioritized new building and seen their population grow slow since the pandemic. As of October, cities like Cincinnati and Milwaukee have also transitioned to become buyers markets, according to Zillow data. That's what I'm saying. It's like all local, right? It's all local. All right. Let's see. Buyers are usually considered to have more power than when it would take 6 months or more to sell all active listings on the market, while markets tilt toward sellers when there's under 4 months of supply. Greg Langham, a real estate agent and owner of Go Idaho Group in Meridian, Idaho, said buyers in the Boise area have turned hesitant this year, even though the region's inventory remains constrained enough to be considered a seller's market. We have all these buyers who are sitting because they're doing the math. So there's a lot more to this article. Frustrated buyers, frustrated sellers. The number of active sellers dropped 0.5% from September. Not a drastic one. Just seeing if there's anything really in this that just is a shocker to me. I think most of this is just a typical thing, to be honest. For a lot of young people, not to discourage them, but it's probably not the most financially smart thing to do, she said. Interesting. Her advice to first-time buyers unsure of what, if anything, they can afford is to understand the pros and cons of home ownership, how mortgage rates can affect purchasing power, and to make sure they'll still have enough money left over to budget for inevitable and unexpected expenses. I think people should make sure that they still have a financial safety net. You never know what is going to happen. So what would be my advice, though, right? In some ways, when you look at this market, so I'll shift now. Let me go. When you look at this market, is the advice to a buyer, well, yeah, it's all kind of expensive. I don't really, you probably shouldn't buy right now. You should probably wait to see what's going to happen. Or, is that the right direction? I don't think so. Because again, right now, what's the alternative? If they are renting, well, they're throwing their money to zero equity. They're not throwing it towards anything. So they're not building any wealth at all. They're throwing it all away. Kevin, good to see you, my friend. Good morning to you as well from Lakeland, Florida. Glad you're here, buddy. So yeah, that's the thing is like, I don't think the advice is necessarily wait or don't buy. I believe, to be honest, in this market and in some markets, it is actually more beneficial for the buyer right now. There's a lot of negotiation power that's beginning to happen that we haven't seen in the past 5 to 10 years. So this shift and this push, the more and more sellers are doing what we saw back in like 2012 and 2009, 2010. There was like a lot of these concessions and credits and buy downs and all these other type of strategies that brought in more affordability for the buyers. So homes are sitting on the market longer than they have in the past 5 years. So there is some negotiation there. So I don't think the advice should be don't buy. I think the advice is go out, start getting educated on what you can afford, go talk to lenders, go find out exactly what this looks like financially for you. And then you as the agent, walk these buyers through this. Be educated on the type of loan programs that are out there and show them exactly what the benefits of home ownership is in regards to just renting, because that's the contrast. We're trying to figure out exactly where that balance is. So I would say buy, because you can always refinance. You can go down a few years later and refinance your house if it's a lower interest rate, but don't gamble with your wealth. I think you can make a strategic buy in the market we're in and not wait. I really do. And I would also like any kind of people that go out there and talk about high cost, and like any kind of objection to buying now. I would focus just on the value of what this market actually does bring. Where is inventory up and there's less competitions, or, what does that look like? What is the economical factor here that we're looking at? And then obviously focus on local. Focus absolutely on your local market. Get very, very educated on what's going on there. All right. Now, let's switch to another article, guys. I got a few articles. It's stacked up over the weekend, so I'm bringing them all. So this one could be, this one's probably going to be a little controversial. This was an interesting article on Realtor.com saying, can your neighbors or HOA force you to be nice? Force you to be nice. So this should be a very interesting article to read. I've not actually read it in its entirety, but I will say just the title alone, define nice. Like, that's such a subjective thing. Different cultures have different definitions about what a good neighbor is and what kindness is, and like that's a very broad spectrum that I think you get into some messy ground by trying to go down this road. I think it could get very messy when you try to enforce anything kind of like this. So let's see where this article's going. Weigh in on this one, and let me know your thoughts in the chat here as we kind of go through this. You can't pick your neighbors, but if you could, wouldn't you want them to be nice? How far would you be willing to go to try to ensure that was the case? Would you ask them to sign a document promising that they'd at least try to be kind to you and everyone else in the area? Wow. This isn't a hypothetical. Wow. All right. In at least one planned community called Silverwood, the developer requires home buyers to sign a kindness pledge, seeking to build a culture of listening to others, excluding hateful words, and engaging on a personal level. The community located in Hesperia, California, argues that explicitly promoting civility can create better neighborhoods in an increasingly divided world. So, look, the premise, right, is great. Yeah, hard no, Emily. Yeah, I would agree. I think how do you quantify what the definition of kindness is and who sets those rules? If the HOA is setting those rules, then that's going to be a constantly moving pendulum here that we can't keep track of what's nice. And if I lived in that area, is me, and this is probably not all what they're meaning, but let's just go with me. Let's say that I'm driving down the street and I don't say hi to all my neighbors as I pass them by. Am I not kind because I didn't do so? You get a certain HOA in place, then directors, they could argue and say, yeah, you're not showing kind, you're not upholding your end of the pledge here. What's the consequence for not doing that? Like, how does that balance out? I mean, this is arbitrary. I wouldn't even know how to quantify any of this. Like, crazy. All right, let's see. But can developers, builders, sellers, or HOAs actually enforce being nice? And beyond the warm feelings, does living in a kindness community offer any real, tangible benefits for those looking to buy, live, and sell there? Here's what prospective homebuyers need to know. Oh, here we go. Okay. The legal reality. It isn't enforceable. Amen, right? Of course it's not. Before you get upset at the idea that you might truly have to be nice to your neighbors if you want to live somewhere, understand that a kindness pledge has virtually no legal weight. It's more of an aspirational thing. All right, there you go. I mean, exactly my point. Like, you cannot make this into any kind of law. It's so changeable. Like, yeah, there are a few main reasons for this. One is that kindness is a vague concept that would be hard to pin down in any real way. Yep. Community covenants and restrictions must be specific, objective, right, and capable of consistent enforcement. See, it doesn't meet any of those standards, right? Says Donna D. Maggio Berger, a Florida, I'm sorry if I'm butchering anybody's names, a Florida-based attorney who specializes in HOA and condominium law. While associations can enforce restrictions related to property use, agricultural standards, and certain behaviors, a vague niceness requirement lacks clear legal standards. Being overly loud, leaving your trash cans on the street, threatening or stalking your neighbors, those are clear behaviors that an HOA could enforce. Notice each one of those just laid out meets those standards, right? It's specific. It's objective, and it's capable of consistent enforcement. If you leave your trash cans out, very simple, right? So kindness as described by things like tone of voice or opinions is less so. Even if a pledge were more specific, enforcing subjective behavioral standards would open HOAs up to significant legal challenges around discrimination, selective enforcement, and potential violations of members' rights. Enforcing it would be nearly impossible and potentially unlawful depending on how it is drafted and applied, says Berger. Even well-intentioned civility pledges could be used to exclude certain groups of people, especially if niceness is equated with conformity to certain cultural norms. Well stated. Well stated. Jessica, thanks for being here. Road to Fulfilling 1984. Yeah, if you haven't read that book, go read that book. This is where it starts. LOL, watch your words. Yeah. Yeah, it's like when you start trying to litigate and put legal enforcement onto words, man, it goes into right what she said right there, right? This attorney's nailing it on the head. Enforcing it would be nearly impossible and potentially unlawful depending on how it is drafted and applied. Even well-intentioned civility pledges could be used to exclude certain groups of people, especially if niceness is equated with conformity to certain cultural norms. Amen, right? She's hitting it right on the head. So what's the point of having one? If kindness pledges aren't enforceable, why do they exist? The answer lies in self-selection and community building. This whole thing just bothers me. I don't like this. I don't like self-selection. Community building. Okay, I don't dislike that. I mean, who doesn't want to be part of a community? Self-selection though, like, do I really want to have any responsibility of the type or the person that moves into my neighborhood? Really? Do we as agents want to ever mention this kind of stuff? No. We represent all people everywhere, all different types of groups, whatever, right? Like that's our job, is to help people buy homes, sell homes. I wouldn't want to weigh into this ever. Developers use these pledges as a screening mechanism. Again, just screams like lawsuit to me. Home buyers who are put off by the idea of signing a kindness pledge will likely look elsewhere, while those attracted to the concept will feel they're moving into a community of like-minded neighbors. I find that young families with children often embrace this kind of environment because it equals a safer or more accepting environment. I just don't like this. I just do not like this at all. Oh gosh, I don't even know. I mean, I think I could beat this to death. Pledging kindness is just one piece of the puzzle. Can your neighbors force you to be nice? No. Kindness pledges carry no legal weight and can't be enforced like traditional HOA rules. Blah, 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 blah. All right. So, like, really, I can summarize this, but I think you guys in the chat have already kind of nailed it. I think no, a hard no. Yeah, Road to Fulfilling 1984. Go read that book. I think everybody is correct. This is just kind of absurdity to me. But now this could come up, right? I mean, if this is some kind of movement that's happening, maybe it comes up in your everyday, conversations. I don't see this happening overwhelmingly in all of these markets. I just don't. But let's just hypothetically say it does. I think, to be honest, what I would really lean into is clarifying what a kindness pledge is, and like making it very clear that if this does come up, that it's not legally enforceable, like by any HOA, by anybody. It should be really, in my opinion, viewed more of a cultural filter. Like, people are going to be looking through a filter of their own making to determine what that is and the definition of kindness. I don't like it. So if it does come up, I think advising people that sure, someone's got a pledge, but it doesn't mean anything, right? There's no way to do anything about it. I would advise buyers that really are ever considering some of this kind of thing, maybe you can have a conversation, advise buyers to scrutinize any of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that they might find in their HOA. If this does come up, I would have them read it, in depth. But anyway, I just, at this point, I don't really care about this article. First of all, I don't see it being anything big. But hey, you know what? We talked about it. Let me do this. I've got Sorry, guys, I've got a lot of articles, so this is just going to be good. Hopefully you guys are getting something of value here. Whoops, I clicked on something. Let me get back to my article. Zoom in. There we go. All right, this next one, this is more of 2026 housing market outlook, mortgage rates, home prices, and more. This is by USA Today. You guys have maybe even noticed, like, I don't have a specific news source. There's certain ones that I lean towards preferring. My preference is better, leaning towards the way they verbalize, the way they reference sources, the way they talk about things, the neutrality of what they talk about. But here's just the reality, and I said this before, and I'll say it again here, is reading across tabs instead of vertical is key. When I say tabs, I'm literally meaning, if you look at my screen, you see these tabs across the top. So when I read one article about a topic, I will read multiple articles from multiple sources about that same topic. And by doing so, I get a clearer picture. A lot of times I can eliminate a lot of biases that are being kind of portrayed in those articles and just cut through. And a lot of times I can find the sources so I can go back and research those and find out what's actually happening. So this is kind of just part of my daily practice. So like if I see something that's really prevalent in a lot of news cycles, like right now, especially, this is the most common one that keeps popping up. What is 2026 going to mean in the real estate market? I mean, it's across every single news source out there is writing about this. So I will then, if that's what's going on, I will then go through tons of news sources. I'll go to Google and type in that housing market 2026 predictions, whatever the search term might be. And then I start going through that and I just start reading, right? So I encourage you guys to do likewise. Just do it, or come here. Come here. I'm planning on doing this. I've enjoyed it so far. Hopefully you guys as well. 2026 housing market outlook, mortgage rates, home prices, and more. What you need to know: industry experts forecast a mixed 2026 U.S. housing market with modestly lower mortgage rates, varied price changes, and higher sales volumes, while noting a regional split between tighter Northeast, Midwest markets and a softer Southwest markets, or South and West markets, and a growing focus on wellness-oriented home features. So there's multiple things in here. We're going to jump straight down to mortgage rates in 2026. So these are all predictions, right? So let's not just take it as this is fact, this is what's going to happen. That's not what this is. These are predictions. And what I've noticed, there's hundreds of articles of this. Matter of fact, if you go back a couple live streams ago, maybe my last one I did last week, I talked about Yahoo Finance, and they had a whole article up there that contradicted on every front what 50 plus other news outlets were talking about predictions, and the headline itself was fear mongering, and I kind of picked it apart. I did. I was a little harsh, and to the point where I actually got an email from Yahoo asking me for my opinion on it. So, because I picked it apart, I'm sure the algorithm kind of kicked in and they noticed all my little keywords, and I mentioned the writer and the author and the reporter and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, we'll see how that transpires. I didn't think they would ever pull it, but Google Trends, you can put in terms, and I guess they must have done that, and they saw my statements, and it scrubbed my video. But my point is, I still stand behind everything I said. I'm not saying yahoofinance.com is wrong on all their articles, but that particular one, I just did not agree with. Mortgage rates in 2026. As of the first week of December, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage has averaged 6.64 throughout 2025. Not far off last year's forecast. So again, see these links? I love that. There's links right here that you can click and go research. For the coming year, most industry pros expect a slight decrease, though perhaps not as much as many buyers would hope. Mortgage Bankers Association 6.4. Now, this is great. This is really good. I love what they've done here. They have taken in multiple sources and multiple predictions and put into one article. Kudos to you, USA Today, for this. Well done. So Mortgage Bankers Association 6.4, Realtor.com 6.3, Kushi is low sixes, Lawrence Yoon, big fan, National Association of Realtors, Director of Economics, amazing guy. Had him on the show a few years ago, actually. He came on and did a whole interview with me. Amazing time with him. Very, very smart. I go over his reports constantly with our agents. I just love it. So Lawrence Yoon, National Association of Realtors, says averaging around 6%, a modest decline that will improve affordability. Fannie Mae, 6. I would agree. Here's the thing. What would happen if that interest rate dropped below 6? Just think about this. If it stays above 6, we settle in to just a calmer market, more time for things to adjust. So there's a logical reason that I would say, because when you're talking about interest rates, you're talking about news, you can't negate human emotion. And what happens, these numbers are crazy, because if you consistently say 6 point something, it's 6, right? In everybody's mind, it's somewhere in 6, somewhere in the 6% range. The moment it dips and that number goes from a 6 to a 5, and it doesn't matter if that number is a 5.99 or a 6.01, it doesn't matter. The moment that number goes to a 5, the headlines will go crazy. Interest rates at 5%, right? And what does that do? Right? That spurs everybody back into the market. Supply then drops. What happens when supply drops? Inflation triggers again. So what is the ultimate strategy play here for the Fed? Bring balance to the market. We talked about that just earlier. So as we go through these predictions, you'll kind of begin to see the argument here. They're balancing the market. They're trying to get that Fed rate to hover around on that 6%. Stay there. Let income threshold increase. Let home value decrease, and find the middle ground, right? Bring balance to the market. Reset the market from high inflation, low income, meet them in the middle, okay? This is just simple economics here. But on that note, actually, that makes me think. If you want to know and like just understand the basics of real estate, just very, very simple, I'm going to recommend a really, really good book for you. And I keep it right here because I read it with my kids and everything. It's actually a really good book. It's this one right here. How an Economy Grows and Why It Crashes, Peter Schiff. Great little book. Look at this. You could read this book in no time at all. And it's even, if you like pictures and you're like more of a picture book kind of person, boom, there you go, right? It's funny. It makes it so simple, but the reality is economics is basically simple, right? Supply and demand most of the time. So check that out. Book recommendation. I would buy that book, keep that book, read that book. All right. Back to the article. Sorry. Let's jump on to the next one. Home sales volume in 2026. NAR, 14% increase. Lisa Sturdivant, 9% increase. Fannie Mae, 7.8% increase in sales of previously owned homes. MBA, 6.3% increase in sales of previously owned homes. Negotiating power is expected to tilt slightly toward buyers as more homes come online and affordability improves, though younger and first-time buyers will continue to face financial hurdles. All right, Danielle Hale. Yeah, so Danielle, I had an email exchange with Danielle a few years ago as well. During the same time I had Dr. Lawrence Yoon in. She's been there for a very, very long time. A very, very smart lady. I appreciate what she puts out. Her articles are good because she uses data. Like, she goes straight to the data. But NAR, yeah. So this is the thing. Can you predict home sales volumes? Absolutely not, right? It is a guess at best. They can look at historical norms based on what the conditions are and make a percentage based on those numbers, and then they make an opinion. The reality is this is very local. Home sales volumes is very local. You have industry shifts that's going on. This is a hard one to predict. The housing market will be bifurcated. Lean inventory in the Northeast and Midwest keeps conditions relatively tight and price growth steadier, while parts of the South and West remain soft, Kushi wrote. Rise in insurance and other carrying costs, especially along the coast, could widen the gap. Sturdivant agrees that tighter conditions will support higher prices in the Northeast and Midwest. AI-driven tech markets such as San Francisco and San Jose are seeing a resurgence in housing demand and will fuel stronger price appreciation in the year ahead. See, this is the whole thing. Is like, where's the industry going? What's happening? What will happen? So these predictions are very hard to nail down. Doesn't mean we don't read them and digest them, but they're very hard to nail down. Americans will keep nesting in 2026 and beyond. Zillow's trend outlook expects more of an emphasis on wellness in the home. Buyers are likely to be drawn to dedicated meditation spaces, smart cleaning technologies, or spa-inspired bathrooms. I think that's the end of the article. On that last note, they're touching a little bit on like what could transpire in like buying trends. And that, I will say, as real estate agents out there, it is very smart to kind of pay attention to those things. See what it is that people are looking for. Like if we were to go back 5-6 years ago, home office was very, very prevalent. It was very, very important. And that's still probably a pretty high up on the list. But second to that, like, or what I would say right now, when you start thinking about the cost of living and what that looks like, people graduating college right now and then trying to get out into the home buying market and the difficulty of that. We keep hearing about the cost discrepancy of income versus the affordability of a home and those discrepancies. Challenge to you guys. Think through this. What could that scenario mean that the shift could happen in the real estate industry? What kind of shift could we see if, and we'll just use this as the scenario, right? The brand new first time home buyer just graduated college or maybe a year out, has a job, not making good money, just got married. What do they do? What type home can they buy, right? Do they end up just renting because of the affordability problem? The income just doesn't match up, right? They maybe have student debts they can't get out from under yet, and they're trying to pay those off. What does that look like for them? This is where that comes in. Think through this. Multi-generational housing. So could this be, and this is me speculating, but in our areas, we have a lot of homes that have walkout basements and second living quarters with kitchens in the basement, those type of things. But what I will say, when you start seeing pressure like this, and it takes a few years to adjust, builders adjust to that market, or the homes that were sitting on the market, or those that have 2-story houses or second living areas become more of a need. So you might have parents that have kids graduating college that have equity in their house that maybe they don't really want to sell because they can't get low interest rates, what they have now and all that kind of stuff, but they have kids that just starting out and they might think multi-generational, right? So that could be a thing. So I'm throwing that out there to be thinking through this. Jessica says, I'm seeing a lot of this already. There you go, Jess. Yeah. So I would say this could be the trend. This is beginning to happen. It's very odd in America for this to be a thing. It's not odd in other countries for this to be a thing. Multi-generational living has been a way of life in a lot of countries. Homes and stuff are structured in that way. Some are 3 stories. There's some in Germany that are 3 stories that, the older couple lives on the bottom, the parents live in the middle, and then the youngest live on the top. And, there's different scenarios like that. So multi-generational is kind of unique in America, but for affordability in foreign countries, it's a way of life. So I can see this happening. So reading through this, just some of my thoughts, I would say, if I was to look at what's going to happen in 2026, I think the way I would advise buyers is I would try to manage their expectation on what this market's going to do. And I would call it a reset, a balancing, and more of that since the pandemic. I would say we're entering into a time where there is going to be more balance and more of a reset to what we have seen over the past few years. I could be wrong, but looking at this data, reading all the articles, I can see that being the case, right? We don't have any major foreclosures going on. We don't have major job loss. We still have actually a lot of job creation. And we also see income, employment costs rising, so that the income's kind of going up, not a lot, but it is going up a little bit. And affordability is kind of coming down. So I just see that. And especially with this comment about the interest rate staying right around that 6 range. So 6.0 to 6.3 range, right? I would just help manage expectations. I would say also when it comes to sellers, the same goes for them. Understanding there's a little bit, we've gotten better at this, but if you were to go back a year or two, most agents were still operating as if inflation was still happening and home values are still astronomically high. I don't think that's the case anymore. Because what we've seen month over month is an average, and this is all local, but if I was to go nationally, month over month appreciation is between 1 and 4. Okay, so it's a 1 and 4% nationally inflation month over month. So it's nothing drastic. So if that's the case, then pricing strategy becomes very, very important. So as an agent, I would lean heavily into my market data on the MLS and see what it's saying, what homes are selling, how long days on the market are, what does this look like in your local area, and then get very equipped with understanding square feet, bedrooms, bathrooms, what all did that correlate, what are people looking for, and then having those pricing strategy expectation conversations with your sellers is what's going to ultimately matter and help you sell more properties and ultimately help them get a property sold. I would also be prepared to have those conversations about concessions where the seller pays for some closing costs. That's becoming more of a norm now, maybe giving other types of concessions inside of agreements. That could be very well a thing. So I would have those conversations with your seller up front so they're prepared that when you get offers, that's what's going to happen. Yeah. So, actually, on the final note, I'll add, focus on, baby boomers, that you've got some that do not or cannot afford homes. You got the baby boomers that are retiring out and have younger kids, or the generation right after that, or whatever it is. And those kids are now going to college and will be graduating. Like, that seems like a good target audience, to be honest, because they either have cash or equity. And then I would probably talk to first-time home buyers, kind of talking about FHA, down payment assistance programs, and getting them prepared, and then talk about multi-generational living and ask them about their parents. Like, hey, how's your parents sit? Would they ever consider, looking at homes with you, and those type of conversations. So, okay. I got a lot, guys. Thanks for hanging with me. Hope you guys are enjoying this. If you guys have any questions for me, drop it in the chat. Love to hear them. Let's see. What do I got now? I got one more. I've just got one more. This one, we're going to weigh into a little bit of a heated conversation here. We're going to go into the weeds just a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy deep in this. But this article is by Inman, real estate news organization. Really, really good source for information in regards to what's going on in the industry. Highly recommend it. It costs to read, so it does come with a yearly fee. It's not cheap, but this article is titled "Zillow Compass Make Final Push Ahead of Hearing Decision." Zillow and Compass have laid out their arguments from a 4-day injunction. The judge will use these filings to decide the fate of Zillow's private listing policy during an antitrust suit. Now, little backstory here. So recent news, past few months over the year, in the National Association of Realtors and other organizations, we were able to have like private listings where we're able to represent sellers without forcing the seller to throw their homes on the MLS and market them worldwide, right? Throwing them out there. So we were able to start doing that and not be in any kind of violations by doing so. Now, there are stipulations that we have to follow, and that is dependent upon your local association of realtors and what those rules are laid out. I'm not getting into that because that gets all different types of opinions about what that looks like. But to summarize this, it's the fact that if I have a seller, and this is the most plausible argument that I've seen for keeping something private, is I've got a client that is well known in the community that doesn't want the whole world to know that they're selling their house. They want us to not necessarily market their home, but we can maybe sell it in-house. Maybe we can slowly trickle it out to certain people we represent. Again, depending upon your association and what the rules are on this. But that's the thing, is the seller does not want their property marketed just yet. So as agents, we were forced to, if we listed a property, we had to syndicate. We had to send it out to every single website out there, including Zillow. All right, so that regulation, that rule, and that policy changed across NAR. So we didn't have to do that. The moment that passed, Zillow immediately came out with a statement that if your property is ever done that way, that when you decide to then market it, we won't accept that listing. So that was the policy that Zillow put in place. It's like, hey, if you don't send your properties to us right now, then you can't put them in here at all. If you do it that way, we won't see your listing. Okay. Now, there's a lot of nuances in this. I'm really just giving you just the subsurface stuff here. There's arguments for both sides on value versus not, and right and versus wrong. So this article is weighing into that because they just had a hearing, right? So that's what this is about. So let's get into this. 2 weeks after going head-to-head in a 4-day evidentiary hearing over Zillow's private listing policy, the court has given Zillow and Compass one more chance to make their case through a set of post-hearing filings. So in other words, had the hearing, one more chance to make your case. You're going to file your case, right? So they can read those documents. The documents filed at the end of last week summarize each party's argument and the laws and legal precedent that support those arguments. The filings will help Judge Jeanette Vargas decide whether Zillow's ban has caused Compass irreparable harm, and if so, whether to stop Zillow from enforcing it as Compass's antitrust lawsuit against the portal giant works its way through the courts. If you don't know, Compass is a massive real estate franchise company, that kind of stuff. It's been in the news as well. Compass has acquired the Anywhere brand, and Anywhere is the parent company of major brands like Century 21, Coldwell Banker, Better Homes and Gardens, ERA, those type of, it's the conglomerate that owns those other franchises. So Compass is now going to replace Anywhere. Whole other conversation. To be honest, more of stock trading and benefits like that is really what it's about. Like, it's not a shocker that these other franchises, which work independently, mind you, that a parent company like Anywhere has sold out. It's happened multiple times over the year. Like, Anywhere used to be Realogy, and Realogy used to be this, and it's just a stock bid. For the most part, there will be some changes in those franchises. Well, yeah, mostly maybe some technology, that kind of stuff, some support, but overall, everything operates independently of those things. So, don't mean to derail, but maybe you didn't know who Compass was, so it makes sense now. Everybody knows who Zillow is. Zillow's post-hearing filing argued against Compass's antitrust claim, saying that the portal giant is within its rights to create and enforce a listing ban per the Federal Trade Commission's guidelines that say a company has the general right to decline to do business with another company as long as it doesn't harm competition. That's probably a very true statement, right? You can't force me to do certain things. I'm an individual company. I do things the way I want. But is there an argument to be had that it's an antitrust, anti-competitive to competition? Does it cause undue harm on a competitor? Okay, so that's where Compass is going to be making this argument, I believe. Zillow said, Compass's record-breaking second and third quarter financial results show the policy had no material impact on the brokerage's bottom line, and argued that if it had, Compass would have disclosed as much in its securities and exchange commission filings for quarterly earnings and its proposed acquisition of Anywhere. So their argument is, if it affected them, why didn't we see that in the bottom dollar? Why did they not have that in the report? The portal also argued that any decline in Compass's three-phase marketing plan, which sees some listings begin their life cycle off market, doesn't necessarily mean the brokerage lost listings. It only means that sellers, when given their options, decided not to take that route. Zillow said it didn't coordinate its policy with Redfin, whose CEO Glenn Kelman learned of it one business day before the public announcements on April 10th. Redfin announced its own version of the rule on April 14th. However, company leaders decided not to enforce it. That little context there, Redfin had done kind of similar things, and they decided not to enforce it. Zillow said the policy actually benefits the market by preventing the fragmentation of listings, which would harm home buyers and home sellers who rely on timely, accurate market information to make decisions. In essence, what they're saying here is that by doing this, it causes the data to be inaccurate. Okay, fair argument, right? The days on the market is not going to be correct. Maybe the actual original listing price and the reductions won't be correct. Those type of scenarios is a fair argument on Zillow's part. Does that matter as much, though, right? Is that more of a benefit to Zillow? Is it truly a benefit to the consumer? Because I don't know, right? All right, let's see here. There we go. Sorry, I got on the wrong screen. The portal said a preliminary injunction against its listing access standards, the policy's official name, would harm home buyers and home sellers who benefit from listings being displayed and marketed to the broadest possible audience. The filing also said the policy protects smaller brokerages which cannot compete on an even playing field with Compass and other large brokerages with exclusive inventory. Okay, so argument being, and if we go into like the independent brokerages. So, okay. As far as Compass is concerned, if they have a private listing, they can market it to all Compass agents, right? That's the argument they're making. And independent brokerages, they don't have that kind of broad scope of agents they can market to, causes a problem, right? Because in essence, Compass, especially if the Anywhere merger happens, has an internal network of the majority of agents in the entire U.S. So if Compass wanted to, they could create an entire private listing network amongst its agents. And the majority of agents will have access to that. So you can kind of see Zillow's major push here, like, oh, we can't let this happen because we lose relevancy, right? So the argument, though, is it would harm home buyers and home sellers who benefit from listings being displayed immediately and marketed to the broadest audience. So in other words, these little silos is not healthy for the market. Zillow said a preliminary injunction against the listing access standards would infringe on its First Amendment rights by enforcing it to display content that violates its values. Compass's injunction would curtail Zillow's right to curate the advertisements listings its platform carries in violation of the First Amendment, the filing read. This harm is irreversible. Meanwhile, Compass's post-hearing filing focuses on the harm Zillow's rule allegedly caused the brokerage's three-phase marketing plan, which had previously experienced major growth and adoption. The brokerage said Zillow holds monopolistic, which is like a monopoly, market power in an online home search and created the policy to eliminate competition based on unique inventory. Their argument is this solely benefits Zillow to do this because of their monopoly that they have. They're not directly calling them a monopoly, but they're calling it monopolistic. In other words, they have the tendency to be a monopoly. They're making the argument they could be. I have control of a certain thing. So that's their argument. This just strictly benefits Zillow to fight this. Compass said a drop in adoption of its three-phase marketing plan proves the existence of anti-competitive harm. The three-phase plan reached 39% adoption by April 2025. However, use of the plan declined after Zillow's April 10th announcements of its policy, dropping to 22% by July. That drop in exclusive inventory, the filing said, harmed Compass's brand visibility and equity via reduced traffic to Compass's site, and led the brokerage to scrap a nationwide billboard campaign focused on private exclusives. Although Zillow says its rule is enforced evenly, Compass claims Zillow has specifically targeted the brokerage. The filing presents non-compliance notice data showing that Compass listing agents have received the lion's share of notices, and internal Zillow communication describing Compass as a bad actor that is agitating throughout the industry. I love it when people fight like this. It's so funny. The brokerage argues that Zillow's policy restricts home seller choice. This is a fair argument, and listing agents' ability to market a home as their seller wishes. See, Zillow is making this argument that agents are going to push for this. The reality is most agents, in the majority cases, want to expose property to the broadest audience. We don't want to restrict marketability of a home. We want to sell houses. But what do we do when we have a specific seller that their wishes are that we don't do that? What are we to do? So that's a problem, right? We have to argue this out a little bit. Compass also argues the rule discourages other brokerages from creating innovative marketing solutions. Compass filing farther pushes back against Zillow's refusal to deal argument, saying that the portal's rule puts limitations on its consumers, i.e. home sellers and agents, and not its fellow competitors, i.e. other portals. All right, Judge Vargas will use these filings to make a final decision about the preliminary injunction, which could come as soon as this month. All right. That's a lot, but I figure this is still kind of relevant, and there's many reasons why. Let me just kind of talk through the article, and I'll tell you kind of the main talking points we need to have with clients, right? I think you probably could figure this out. But what I would say this is I'll do that here. You can come back here, and I'll be talking about this because this does affect us, right? So I'm going to be monitoring, and I encourage you to do likewise, is monitor the judge's ruling very closely on Zillow's listing access standards. This will ultimately determine the visibility of private pocket listings, whatever you want to call them. Hate the term pocket, but private listings and pre-MLS marketing strategies. So we need to be aware about what this judge rules with, right? We need to watch it very closely. Does the judge rule in favor of Zillow or in favor of Compass, right? So this is being talked about. What would this mean for our industry? And then at the same time, you really need to make sure that you don't just go into every single seller conversation and have that conversation like make the argument for the seller that they should do private listing. Like, is there a strategy to that? Yes, there is a legitimate strategy. But really, you also want to make sure that you're articulating the true value of the MLS and syndication. So yeah, Zillow, it's like this love-hate thing with Zillow, right? But the reality is we're trying to sell properties for our sellers, and exposing the property to as many potential buyers in the market as possible where they are is going to help us move more properties. So we got to balance that issue here. So where will this land, right? What will happen? Here's where I would say the seller consultation is very important. And I think you probably will know exactly where I'm going with this. But like, let's say you're sitting down with your client right now in the current state we are, regardless of any of this ruling, regardless of anything that happens here, and they say they want to keep their house off the market. They just want to show it privately. And you do that. You show it privately. You don't put it on the market. And then you finally do. What happens, right? Zillow's got a ban. Does it go to their site and does it get marketable? You need to make sure as an agent you communicate that very well and succinctly to your seller, the risk of doing just this. So make sure they're aware about this, educate them well, and be a good agent. Be a good agent. Very well, guys. Yeah, there you go. That's my typical process. That is what I do. I do appreciate you guys joining in, participating. Feel free to throw something in the chat. I do appreciate you guys being here. Like I said at the very beginning, I'm gonna really figure out a schedule that works for myself and that I can post and be consistent on jumping on here. This new format is extremely easy for me to do. I'm inviting you right into my home office, doing what I do every single morning. So I'm hopeful that you guys will be educated at the end of this, get something of value, and that, you come here and you bring comments, you chat with me, send me articles that you want me to kind of go over here. That would be helpful. Let's build a community of education here, of focusing on what is going on in our industry so we can better lead and, direct our clients. And it's YouTube, so I got to say it. Subscribe, like, and ring the bell if you found value here, right? So hopefully you guys will consider doing that. I want to get this out to as many people as possible. This is not just for my agents, it's for everybody out there. We want to educate consumers, agents, and help us all to be better. Want to elevate, definitely want to elevate our industry above, just a standard, just buyer and seller traffic, and all we do is negotiate and sell properties. We want to be true professionals delivering just an amazing experience and professionalism to our clients in all things that we do. So hopefully this will help you guys do just that. So also, one final thing, I'm actually streaming this to Twitch as well. So there's a Twitch chat going. I've not embedded that just yet. It's a weird platform to do this on because that's typically, I'm not a gamer, but that's typically where gamers are all at. But there's a demographic there that needs to hear about future things they need to be thinking about. So I hope that some of you guys watching on Twitch right now, thank you, is getting value here that's going to help you in your life to buy and sell real estate or be a real estate agent if you are one. And if you guys they're watching on YouTube, interested in checking out Twitch, you can follow me there too. It does give some extra little benefits. It's kind of weird. It's got all kinds of little things that pop up and do things. It's a little more engaging community-wise. So it's kind of neat. But anyway, I'm streaming there as well. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I'll probably be back probably tomorrow again, do it again, go over some news articles, and we'll connect again then. I'll shoot for some time in the morning. Again, not got the schedule figured out just yet. But in the meantime, guys, just keep doing what you're doing, represent your clients well, and just remember this. More often we need to be reminded about things than we need to be taught. And what I mean is, a lot of things we talk about is reminding us of our jobs and how to do our jobs, and we forget things very quickly and easily. And being taught new things, we forget more things. So I'm not saying don't continue to learn. Absolutely encourage that. But remind yourself of the daily practices, the daily challenges you have, and the daily scripts you go over, and just constantly remind yourself about how to be a good agent. So, guys, I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Go sell something, represent clients well, and see you soon. Take care.